Good morning, Athena Baptist Church family. I wanted to give you another just video update today about some of what's going on, why we've made some of the decisions we've made. So I want to talk to you today about why some of this social distancing and quarantine and isolating ourselves as much as possible really actually does matter. And then I've also got some really good news that I'm excited to share with you today as well. As far as why it matters, we've all probably heard or seen on social media, cancer kills more people, suicide kills more people, the flu kills more people. And if we're talking sheer numbers at this point, that's true. And those are given to us oftentimes on Facebook by non-experts. And let me say, I'm not an expert. I've been reading, I've been talking to the hospital, and so I think what I'm giving you today is good information. The problem with the coronavirus is not the percentage of those who get it and die, though if you're 60 or older, you are at a much higher risk of being exposed or of having problems if you are exposed and get the virus. But here's the real problem with this particular virus, and that is the matter of speed. At this point, this thing is spreading incredibly fast. This is a virus that our bodies, in contrast to, say, the flu, don't really know how to fight off yet. And man, God has made us fearfully and wonderfully. There is no cure for any virus in the world. Only the human immune system can do that. And that's pretty amazing that God has made us that way. But our bodies are figuring out how to fight this off. And with the speed at which it spreads, even the real small percentage of people who need hospitalization, they are quickly going to overwhelm our hospitals. And hospitals do not have unlimited supplies. So if St. Anthony Hospital in Pendleton, where I work as a chaplain part or on call, if they have, and I'm making this number up entirely, they have not said this to me, if they have enough equipment to care for 100 patients who are having extreme difficulty breathing, and there's 150 patients in our area who need that kind of equipment and care, then only a third, well, only 2/3 of the people who need care are going to get it. There's going to be 50 people who aren't going to get the care that they need. And if you look at the numbers of even the very small numbers of people who are hospitalized from the coronavirus, I think you'll quickly see that if this spreads as fast as it appears to, uh, there's a smaller number of hospital beds and even a smaller number of equipment in those hospitals to care for people who have those needs. So why are we canceling services and encouraging social distancing and asking you to cancel anything even in your own life that's non-essential? It is for love of neighbor. And if you remember Jesus' words when the Pharisees are trying to trick him, they ask him, what's the greatest commandment? He says the most important thing is to love God. And the second most important is to love your neighbor. And if we just live our lives as though this isn't going to spread and as though people aren't going to need hospitalizations, then we're not really being very loving towards our neighbor. And in 2 or 3 months, it would really be fantastic to be able to look back and say, man, this thing was way hyped and it didn't happen as people thought it would. Then in 2 or 3 months, be mourning the loss of people who died. And we don't want to do anything that would contribute to loss of life or illness or people's health. So please just understand that though this may not present a huge danger to you, we want to slow what the government is asking of us is to slow the rate this thing spreads as much as possible so that those who need health care can get it. And I would encourage us to love our neighbors in that way. Christians throughout history are no strangers to plague. In fact, pestilence and plague, the fact that that's not something that the church faces regularly is pretty recent, within the last 100 years, with germ science and sanitary science and the incredible medical technology and breakthrough that we have these days. We're kind of in a unique time where this is rare for us. But if we go all the way back to the Roman Empire, early on in the church's founding, plague was very common. Emperors would isolate themselves in their homes without any contact from outsiders. Doctors would flee. There's records of Roman doctors fleeing cities, just leaving people to die. And there's a pretty good record of Christians, I'm sure others as well, but Christians who stayed, who cared for those who were sick. Sadly, some of them contracted those viruses and plagues themselves, and some of them died. But there's kind of, and that's sad, but there's kind of this neat picture of God's people being willing to stay and care for the sick, even if it means they get sick and die. Because really, ultimately, what we see is that that's what Jesus did. That he looked on us with great mercy and cared about the terrible plight of our lives as those who are subject to sin, who choose to do wrong, and who justly deserve for God to be angry with us and separated from us. But he cared enough about us in our plight to come down to where we are, to leave heaven, to come to earth, to live a sinless life that we couldn't live, to die in our place vicariously, and then to be raised victoriously 3 days later, proving that he can give us life and that he has conquered both sin and death. And so I think it's because Jesus was willing to leave heaven and leave his comfort and put himself at risk, knowing that he would be beaten and hated and crucified to save us from what was going to kill us, namely sin. That Christians can do the same. So my encouragement to you is to distance yourself from people who may not have it, and we know that this can be spread without showing any symptoms. So distance yourself as much as possible. But if there's people around you who are sick and who need care, or maybe elderly and who are isolating themselves so that they don't get sick, would you consider finding ways to meet their needs and care for them? Because as believers in Jesus, we get to know that even if we're one of that percentage of people who doesn't get the care that they need and we die, all death can do is deliver us to Jesus. And so we have no need to fear. And that is the really good news that I want to share with you. That Jesus has ultimately fixed all of the problems of sin and death for those who believe. And so for us who have trusted Christ, we know that our healing is secured. If you have not trusted Jesus, if you don't even know what it means to trust Jesus, or you just want to know more, man, I'd encourage you, contact me, call me, come down to the church. I would be glad to meet with you. But we want to make sure that people know ultimately where their healing is. And that's great news for us, that we can have no fear. So love your neighbor by not spreading this around and keeping the hospitals as free as they need to be to care for people who are sick. But love your neighbor by getting out there and getting close to them if they need care and if they need help. And let's do our part to stem this tide. And hopefully in a couple of months, we'll be able to look back and say, man, that was way better than we thought. That's what I'm praying for. I would encourage you to pray for it with me as well. I love you all. God bless.